Hi, I'm Mary Wing Soares, and today with me is our wonderful town manager, Kevin Smith, and this is Transparency in Government. Thanks so much for being
Thanks
here
for having
with
me
us.
back, Mary.
Yep. Well, it's February.
It's a new year.
Almost. No, we're in January
I know, we're still in
right?
January,
We're still in
but-
January, but right around the corner are the deliberative sessions.
Yep.
So, I mean, I have the copy of the draft warrant here. I thought
Okay.
maybe there was a couple of things you might want to talk about.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a large warrant. Again, I think in total there'll be 26 articles. I think there's one that was discussed prior to the public hearing regarding the speed limit on 102, which may end up going on the ballot as well. So,
Well, I'm going to stop you right there,
Sure.
because how can the town make a decision about the speed limit on 102? It's a state road.
well, it can't. So what was discussed amongst the town council was having a non-binding question on the ballot to see if the citizens would favor petitioning the Department of Transportation to lower the speed limit from 55 to 45 in the area along 102 headed towards Hudson. So the whole thing isn't 55 miles an hour, but a portion of it is.
Right.
And so it would be a non-binding question, but it would be to gauge the public support for lowering the speed limit there and trying to use that as leverage on the Department of Transportation to do something about lowering the speed limit along there.
And the reason we want to lower the speed limit is because the area is starting to get built up, and there's
is.
difficult for people to get in and out of their streets and subdivisions.
Yeah,
and-
anybody that's lived in that area over many years along Acropolis or Parmenter, really anywhere coming out on that 102 area where it's 55 miles an hour, it can be a pain trying to get out, and sometimes you get a dart out, because the cars are going so fast. The speed limit's 55, which means you have cars going 65,
Right.
maybe even 70. And now there's new developments. You have the Hickory Woods that's already built. You have the Cross Farm development, which is just in its early phases. Of course, you have the flea market there as well, which has been there for a while. So there is new development coming up in that area, and there's many people that feel 55 is too fast.
Now, is there anything in the meantime, though, that the town could be doing? For example, putting up some of those, the speed limit is this, and you're going this fast?
Yep,
That kind of a
that's
thing?
very possible to do that, and I think that's something that we can do easily enough, is because we do have it on Mammoth Road already, which is a state road.
Right.
We have it as well on Stonehenge Road, which is not a state road, but they seem to work pretty effectively. So I think if we got one there, it would also work as a deterrent to slow people down.
Now, I know it's the Traffic Safety Committee that deals with this type of thing. Do you ask the police to ever just go sit and monitor just to see whether or not they are being effective? And they have shown...
Yeah, oh yeah, we take counts in certain areas of average speeds. And yeah, I mean, it's not just because the signs are up doesn't mean we're not watching those areas anymore. But we do know that they work fairly well as a deterrent to get people to slow down. When you're driving on the road and the thing's flashing, you don't want the person behind you to see that, oh my gosh, I'm going how many miles over the speed limit here? So it tends to get people to pump the brakes and slow it down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility to do that there.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, I'm on the planning board, and we hear a lot about traffic concerns
Yep.
with Cross Farms and also being on 102. So it's good to know. Our town council chair came and said that the town council was working towards this. So
Yep.
it's nice to see. Although 26 warrants, it's going to be quite a bit of reading that people are going to have to do.
They are.
Until they get to 25, which is so important about our Grange. I'm kidding. I mean, I'm not kidding. It is a very important warrant, but there's, the budget is the budget,
Yep.
and you all have tried to keep the default close to the town council budget, but then you've added a supplementary budget on here.
Right.
So
And the purpose for having the supplemental budget is simply because under the new rules passed by the state legislature last year, certain items that we were able to include in our default budgets previously can no longer be included in the default budget. And so they have to be included either in the proposed budget or in a separate warrant article, and we've chosen to go the route of the separate warrant article. Things like trash pickup, trash and recycling. Previously, trash and recycling could go in our default budget. It's a contract. It does have an escalator, which means it goes up 3% every year. But it was okay previously for that to go in the default. Now the legislature has said, nope, you can't put that in the default budget because it has the escalator. You can put it in a separate warrant article for people to vote on. And then if it passes in the supplemental this year, then it can go in the default next year.
Right, because you're explaining that the contract, when it expires, and what the annual percentage
Correct.
escalation is.
Correct.
But I thought also things like your
Yep.
contract, anybody else who's not in a union's contract would be not allowed in the
In the default.
In the default. So I'm not seeing why isn't that?
So let me explain that.
Yes, please.
And follow the bouncing ball at home if you can, because this is, we don't make the rules. Let me just start by saying that. The state legislature makes the rules on this, and I think it's crazy the way they do it. But what they've said is that, yes, things like anything that's not a collective bargaining agreement contract has to go either in your proposed budget or a separate warrant article. It cannot go in the default budget. So my salary, for example, any proposed increase on my salary could not go in the default budget. That being said, if we had a position and somebody was making $100,000 in that position and they retire, and a new person comes in and they're hired at $60,000. Okay, now there's a $40,000 delta. Well, the way the default rules are, when you're doing your default budget, you budget that position the same as it was the year before. So
Sure.
even though the person's gone and you've brought someone in a lower salary, they've said, no, your default budget is the same. So now in the default, that person's at $100,000. In the proposed budget, that person's at $60,000. But now there's a $40,000 delta, right? Well, as long as the proposed budget isn't over the default budget, we can take items that could have been in the supplemental and move them into the proposed budget up until it goes up to the default.
Okay.
So my increase now, and it's not just mine, it's all of the non-union employees, which includes the library as well. All of those salaries now can go into the proposed budget so long as it's not over the default
Okay.
budget.
And that's why it's not over the default budget.
Correct.
So how many people did you have retire this year?
Well, it's not just retirees, it's turnover in employees, so employees who end up leaving. You know, we get a good handful of them every year.
Yeah. You just, I mean, compared to the school,
Yeah.
your budget is, 33,000. Wouldn't it be lovely if it was 33,000? 33 million. And so you don't have nearly as many employees, is my
Right.
point, as
Yep.
the school does.
Yep.
So they see a huge difference every single year.
Right.
A couple of $100,000
Right.
difference every single year.
Yep.
Yours probably isn't quite that high.
No, it's not quite that high, but we have turnover in the police department, the fire department, the library has had a lot of turnover. But even in town hall, we've had some retirements, and so there's been turnover there. So we've probably had more than usual in the last couple of years, and part of that, Mary, is we're getting to a point now at town hall. I joke around with the employees at town hall now because when I came on a little over 5 years ago in 2013, I think I was the youngest employee in town hall. Pretty sure. Now I'm like the middle-aged employee. There's a lot who are younger than me now
Right.
at town hall
Right.
because we had a lot of folks who were reaching retirement age who are now all retiring. And we knew it was coming, but now it's happening.
Sure.
So, and it'll continue to happen for probably the next 3 to 5 years.
So when are your contracts coming up? The police and the fire?
2020.
Not until 2020.
Right.
Okay.
So next year.
Next year.
Yep.
All right, so any of the other warrant articles that you really wanted to talk about? Was there anything new on the budget?
Let's see.
I mean, on the warrant?
So I explained the supplemental and the operating budget. You know, there's a lot of these are repetitive, expendable maintenance is on here again, roadway maintenance. You know, the cemetery expansion continues to be on here.
So one of the things when I was at the budget hearing
Yep.
was that you're using an awful lot, comparatively speaking, of the unassigned fund balance this year.
Right.
There got to a point where there was a negative 200,000 plus figure there, meaning that you are going $200,000 lower than what you prefer to keep in the. Do you feel comfortable with that, or do you feel uncomfortable with that?
No, I feel comfortable with it. So just to explain to the viewers at home, so the unassigned fund balance, which is also referred to as the undesignated fund balance, is basically the town's savings account. It's any surplus monies at the end of every fiscal year go into this unassigned fund balance. And surplus monies are monies that weren't expended, so under expenditures, and revenues that came in higher than anticipated. And it's a combination of those two things. And so that makes up your surplus, and that goes into the unassigned fund balance. There's no law on how much you have to keep in your fund balance, but there are guidelines.
Right.
There's guidelines from the Department of Revenue. There are guidelines from GFOA, which is General Financial Accounting Standards. There's guidelines from our auditors, which usually is what GFOA is. And then there's our own town policy,
Sure.
in which we have our own guidelines.
And the reason you have the savings account is so that you have a good bond rating. If there's any emergencies, you don't have to have a spike in the tax rate.
Primarily emergencies.
Yeah.
Primarily emergencies and catastrophic events. And I've asked before what is a catastrophic event because we have insurance on all of our buildings as well. So I'm sure that would kick in. And hopefully we never have a catastrophic event that requires us to immediately go into our fund balance. But it's an emergency contingency fund. And so the question becomes, how much money do you want to keep in that? And it's largely, it's all made up of the town surplus. But if there was suddenly a catastrophe that happened at the school district, let's say, while the school also has a much smaller emergency fund, it's less than $1 million, and the school also is limited by how much money they can put in there by state law. The town could also help out the school district if necessary, if that came to fruition. So it's how much money do you think we should keep on hand? And again, it goes back to these guidelines. We've always, in this area, usually in every other area of our budgeting, we're very conservative with our budgeting. In this area, we haven't been so conservative in the keeping of the money. We've been much more aggressive in basically putting the money back into the budget every year and keeping the necessary minimum that we need in that particular fund balance.
Right.
And part of the reason for that is it is taxpayer money. It's money that the taxpayers have paid that was left over from the budget. And a part of it is that we don't feel like we should be holding on to a largesse of the taxpayers' funds if it's not necessary to do so.
And there's been many times recently that you have lowered the tax rate by using that money. This year, I noticed that you're using a large portion of it to help finish the rail trail.
Correct, and we can definitely get into talking about that. So, just to finish up the, discussion of the fund balance, there are towns, I believe Wyndham, for example, they keep zero in their fund balance. So what they do is at the end of every year, when they go to set their tax rate, whatever is in that account, they put it into their tax rate, and they keep nothing. And we asked them, what happens if you have a catastrophic event and have an emergency? And their answer was, well, we would hold a special meeting and ask for the residents, the taxpayers, to approve funding, and you have to go to court for that to have a special meeting and everything. So there are ways to do it, but that's how they operate.
But compared to Londonderry, and I
Yep.
know Wyndham and Londonderry aren't the same size.
Yep.
But, we both have high schools, we both have, many people coming into our towns.
Yep.
Their tax rate's much higher than ours. So it would make sense that they would give all money back to the residents just to try and keep that tax rate from going nuts.
Well, and the part of the issue, though, with that, too, is I personally don't think you want to get into a habit of using the money to manipulate the tax rate every year, because the problem you run into is when the money's not available, you then have these spikes, artificial spikes every year in your tax rate. And so rather than keeping it steady, you get this sort of thing. So one year you're like, oh, my taxes look great. And the next year you're like, whoa, why this huge spike in the taxes? Well, there was no money available. So we have, kind of a policy that we use the fund balance on one-time only expenditures, not reoccurring expenditures. So let's go to the rail trail, for example. This is kind of a special one because the rail trail is asking the total amount of the article is 1.6 million, but a large chunk of that, $1 million, is made up of a state grant.
Well, is 800,000, and then they're taking 200,000 out of their, don't they have a balance in their own fund or something? I thought
They
that's where it
do,
was
yeah.
working.
So it's 800. I'm sorry. So 800,000. It's a $1 million grant, of which the grant pays 80%. So that'll be $800,000 from the grant. Trailways themselves will raise $225,000, and then $600,000 will come from unassigned fund balance.
Right.
This is huge, we think, because we don't get the grant if we don't put in the matching funds. And so we're leaving a lot of money on the table if we don't approve this warrant article.
Right.
And this finishes up the rail trail all the way to Manchester.
Right, so that's from Salem all the way to Manchester now, wouldn't it, with that?
Yes, except there's a small portion between Londonderry and Derry that won't be completed until 4A goes in.
Okay.
So that's a few years out. But other than that one portion, it'll be completed all the way to Manchester. And then there's other gaps once you get into Manchester. I mean, theirs goes on for a little while. But the reason it's so much, too, is because the last portion of this that starts at Harvey Road is basically kind of like a sidewalk, because the rail bed is gone, because when they did the airport improvements, they went over the old rail bed.
Sure.
So because that doesn't exist anymore, and because of the rules the airport has about where you can put a footpath close to the airport, it's going to be going along Harvey Road all the way into Manchester. But it's essentially going to be a sidewalk that goes all the way until it meets the start of the trail in Manchester around Perimeter Road.
Okay.
So
that's why it's so,
it's a lot of
it's
money.
a lot of money.
Yep.
But again, it doesn't have, there's no
tax impact.
And that's what people have to really pay attention to when they're looking at these warrant articles. When you're using the unassigned funds, you've already paid the taxes
You have.
in the past.
Right.
So you're not paying them again.
It's the taxpayers' money.
Right.
And
So it's your decision whether or not you want to use the taxpayers' money this way.
Yep.
I guess, though, the other caveat is it's not as though you're going to get it back if you don't.
No,
use
so
it
what
for
happens
this.
is let's say it failed, so it calls for using $600,000. So if the warrant article fails, that $600,000 goes back into the surplus.
Right.
Now, again, you could have the voter say, no, we don't want this, and we really want the town council to take that $600,000 and put it toward lowering the tax rate in 2019. And that can happen. You can do that. But again, I would caution people, there's a short-term gratification of it going down, but if you don't have that $600,000 to put toward it every year, then it's an artificial deflation of the tax rate is what it is.
And looking at our tax rate, should everything pass right now,
Yep.
what is that? What is the impact? Do we know yet?
Yeah, so a very conservative number on it would be, if everything passed on it, it would be $5.27, which is 2 cents lower than what we presented Monday night. And what is the reason for that? We're constantly revising our revenue numbers. And our rates we're getting on bonds, CDs, interest rates are just crazy right now. They keep going up.
Sure.
And so it works to our advantage. So we're getting more on that part of the revenue than we anticipated. So the estimate would be 527, which is a 28 cents increase. That's a conservative estimate. I could sit here and 99% guarantee you it's not going to be $5.27 if everything passes. It's going to be lower than that.
Okay.
But we estimate conservatively because I have a really good feeling revenue numbers will be higher come October, because we don't set the rate till October. The only thing that's set in stone in March is what passes on this, the appropriation.
Right.
We won't know revenue numbers until October, and we won't know the valuation number until October either, which is the biggest component of this is the total town valuation. We're in a reval year. I got news for everyone, okay? Your valuation on your home is almost guaranteed to go up this year. And that is because as a town, we're 80% of the market. The market's still doing very well, the real estate market.
Right.
And we've been well below. If you look at what homes are selling for versus what they're assessed for, they're a lot lower assessed, you know. And funny, would you believe, no one ever comes into our office asking for their home to be assessed higher.
No kidding.
Based on what the market's doing.
Right, exactly.
And
why would we?
And why would you? Right. But it's every 5 years we do the reval of the entire town. And so barring some major drop off in the economy this year, values of commercial properties, industrial properties, and residential are all going to go up.
Right.
What that does is that lowers the tax rate. Values go up, the tax rate goes down. You're not paying less in taxes,
Right.
you're not paying more in taxes. It's just, it's cause and effect.
Right, but on the other hand, I just read that Coca-Cola is expanding.
Yep.
So that's going to add to the tax base.
Yep.
It's going to expand that tax
Right,
base even
because
more.
their valuation will go up because of the increased activity that they're doing in the building, the increased assets
Right.
that they'll have in that facility.
Right. Is there anything else up on Pettingill Road that might be coming down the pike that
Might
we
be,
haven't
Mary.
seen? Might
I'm
be.
not at liberty to talk
okay.
about it, but there is something in the cooker right now.
All right, that's what we like to hear.
Yes.
And of course, as Woodmont finishes their buildings, then the valuation of those go up, right?
Yeah, I mean, so what you see out there right now between the brewery that's being built and the mixed-use building, the 4-story building, that's something that was not on the tax rolls last April 1. It will be on the tax rolls this year.
Right.
Cross Farm, all of those homes, they weren't on the tax rolls last April 1. They'll be on the tax rolls this year.
Right.
Anything that was built between April 1 of last year and this year gets added to the tax rolls. The TIF district up at Pettingill is now closed. That wasn't on, only a portion of it was on last year's tax valuation. This year, all of it will be on. That's an additional $29 million right there.
Right.
So there's there's all the utility work, additional utilities, those will be on.
Right.
So in addition to just the valuation being adjusted, you have all this new development, which will also go on,
Right.
which
And that will literally lower your tax rate.
it will.
Not your tax bill, not just your rate, but your bill.
But your bill, right.
Right. Or may, I should say.
Provided, right, because as I always say, you balance that with how much money you're spending. So spending goes up in the schools and on the town side, valuations go up, revenues go up. What you hope is happening is that the spending isn't going up at a higher rate than the other two are.
Sure.
You try to keep it balanced.
Right. Well, I think, as one taxpayer, you've done a very fine job over the course of the 5 years that you've been with us.
Well, thank you.
Hang
Yeah.
out, stick around, keep up the good work.
We try to be responsive to the taxpayers.
Right.
It's Mary, as you know, it's always a balancing act between providing a quality level of services versus also making it livable here in
Sure.
town too, with what people are paying in taxes. I think if you look around in the state of New Hampshire and look around at the surrounding communities, we get a great bang for our buck here in Londonderry. We have a high quality of services, a high level of services in town for a tax rate that is very reasonable, especially as you compare them to other
Sure.
communities.
We're just about out of time. I just wanted to ask you one last question, though. Is there something on the warrant about leveling out our town common?
There is. There's a article on there to fix the drainage. You know, I don't know how level the common will be afterwards, but certainly the drainage will be such that when we have, you know,
Old Home
rainstorms, yeah,
We're not swimming.
exactly, and that's been happening more and more. Where it's just it became to the point where we have to do something because you have events like Old Home Day, and if it's raining the week prior or even the day before, it's just a mud pit out there. And we had the same thing at Christmas time when we had Santa on the common. There were areas we had to mark off because we had so much rain before Christmas. It was kind of gross out there. So the plan is this. If the article passes, which I hope it will, again, we're using unassigned fund balance to fund that project. If the article passes, the very next day, we're going to start the work out there. Because we want it all set in time for springtime, and especially summer when a lot of events are going on out
Right.
there.
Is next year the 200th
This year,
this year? So
300th.
2019, 300.
300th anniversary.
Right, so
Yep.
this is going to be a big deal. This is
It
going to be a
is.
big party.
Yep.
In August.
In August.
In
yep.
August,
Really,
okay.
and throughout the year, there'll be multiple events, but the biggest part will be in August around Old Home Day.
Right.
We're changing up the events this year a little bit as far as the timing of it. The Boot Scoot and Boogie is now going to be Saturday night. So Old Home Day will end with a big party down at the rec, the Laugh-A-Ball Fields, with a concert, a bonfire. You know,
It's going to be a lot of fun.
it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll talk about that after budget season, after
Yes.
budget passes. There's 2 positions open on the town
On
council?
the town council, yep. 2 positions open there, 3 years each. There's, I think, a position or 2 open on the budget committee.
Your
Let's
town
see.
moderator was just elected last year, and that's 3 years, right?
Correct, yes.
And how about, do you have a town
We have a treasurer.
treasurer
That
that gets
position is up
elected? Okay.
this year as well. And I'm trying to think if there's any other library trustees. All of this is on our website. People can go to the town website, see what positions are open if they're interested in running for any of these positions.
Great.
Throw their hat into the ring.
Super.
Yeah.
Kevin, thanks so much.
My
It was a
pleasure.
lot of information, and I'm going to be posting the link to this show specifically a lot of different places
Great.
because I think people really need to know about it's going to be a large packet, and you really want to take the time to look through it.
And if people have questions at all, call the office, 432-1100, extension 120. If they have any questions about any of these warrant articles, what the tax impact will be, what something means, happy to go over it with them and
Great.
talk people through it.
Because we didn't nearly touch on all
No.
the articles.
Right.
Especially number 25 that has to do with the
The
Grange.
Grange. The Grange, Mary.
Anyway.
You seem interested in
I
that
do
one.
seem interested in that. I'm hoping that that 20,000 from the unassigned fund balance will pass so that our Grange will get a new roof and a new septic system. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for
Yep,
being here. I
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you again next month.
Okay.